Hi everyone. We'll wait for a couple of minutes and then we can start when we have other participants joined. Hi everyone. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all for today's webinar on AI-assisted engineering beyond the hype. So I'm Johan Gunatilaka, working as an associate architect for 99X. Joining me today to lead this session is our Chief Developer Experience Officer, Kalana Vijaysekhar. Good afternoon, Kalana.
Good afternoon, Johan.
Yeah. So before we begin, let me take a couple of minutes to introduce Kalana a bit. So with over 17 years of experience in software industry, Kalana brings deep expertise on multiple domains and technologies. So his passion towards emerging trends and innovation has consistently placed him in the cutting edge of the industry. And Kalana has worked with many diverse stacks, including mobile full stack development, but are not limited to those, many other technologies. And he has given his contribution to multiple projects as an architect as well. So Kalana is very much instrumental in bringing expertise into 99X to make developer life very much easier as the CDXO. And he always has this energy and drive towards looking for new technologies. That's why I think we are in good hands for this session we are going to have today. So over to you, Kalana. And before we begin, I think I have a question, Kalana. Just want to put it out there. This question may sound a bit like asking a parent who is your favorite child. So my question to you is, what's your favorite LLM at the moment?
Uh, yeah, thanks for that introduction, Johan. And I don't know if I can pick anything because it will be like a new LLM probably out there while we talk about it. But yeah, I think right now I'm a big fan of Anthropic actually. No paid advertisements or anything, just
Yeah.
personal, yeah.
I
Pick.
think for the record, Kalana will read out loud today's date. It's 9th April 2025. So if someone wants to quote, we just gave the best one out there at this very moment, I think. Yes. I think we can proceed to the session. While you share the presentation, Kalana, I have another question before we start. So we have seen a bigger hype around AI-assisted engineering. And also some argue that this is a bubble. Do you think it's actually a bubble, or what's your idea on that?
Yeah, I think that's a entry point for the discussion today. Well, there's no argument that there's quite a bit of a hype around this. The real question is whether Gen AI in product engineering does it really deserve that hype? So to reason about it, I think of this statement: building great products takes all our energy that is humanly possible. So well, we are all about like building great products, building great software. That's what we do. So we know there's plenty of times we have good ideas. We want to add new features. We know there are technical activities. If I have time and energy to do something, that will improve our software. But at the same time, that's a limitation as well. Like we have limited energy, we have limited time to work on these things. So if Gen AI somehow allows us to break away some of these limitations, then I think it'll deserve the hype it has right now. So I'd like to dig a bit deep into this statement and see how we can achieve that with Gen AI. So as you can see um, in this statement, the first limitation that we have is the limitation of energy. So if we can somehow save energy by not doing some of the things that we do right now, or else if we can do things bit more efficiently, do the same things but do things bit more efficiently, then we'll have energy to do the other things that we always want to do. And there's also this limitation of being human. So if we can somehow be a bit superhuman than we are right now, so we'll also be able to do more things that will make our software and products better. So that's a angle that I take with how Gen AI comes into software development. So to dig a bit more deep into this, let's take a look at this, right? So just to scope our discussion, so Gen AI in products can go into product features, or else it can go into helping us with the engineering activities that we do. So today's discussion is this one. So how Gen AI helps us, I'd like to categorize them into three areas. This is like a broad categorization. So I see some applications or tools that we can think of as a pair program or like a co-pilot who will work with us. Um, and there are some tools that work as expert advisors. And then we also have certain tooling that goes as autonomous agents. So just to give some examples around it, some of these tools you might be already using. So GitHub Copilot, Cursor, Amazon Q, things like that are examples of helping you with things like coding, debugging, in general software development, right? So these tools are very easy to adapt, and these were like the first to adapt as well in Gen AI into engineering. And if you're not already using it, like out of the box, they will give you at least 15% productivity on top of what you are having right now, uh, unless there's like really small exceptions in terms of the tech stack that you use and so on. And the next set of tools that I see are kind of expert advisors that helps you to quickly find more knowledge. So things like ChatGPT or the chat interfaces of the AI tools. These helps you bring in knowledge much more easily than how it used to be. And then we have autonomous agents. So these are just few logos. Don't be upset if you don't see the favorite logo of yours. Um, so basically, how I see autonomous agents is it's like another colleague of yours who sits in your team and takes away some of the work that you do, so that these agents can help you with achieving building great products. So in terms of examples, like there are some logos here, but it could be your own agent that you build with from scratch or using some readily available tools and frameworks put together. So but these tools, like come and go, and like every day there's some new tooling out there. So if we try to get our head around like what they actually do, right? So one thing that they do is they augment our cognitive capabilities, like what we can do as humans. So as a developer, I might be able to remember a certain amount of API documentation, SDKs, things like that. But these tools will, expand my ability very easily, and I'll be able to, know much more things. And this tooling also helps improve my performance. So if I used to write, I don't know, 10 unit tests per hour, with this tooling, I might be able to do 20. Or if I, used 15 minutes to draw a wireframe, now I might do it in 5 minutes. So likewise, it's an performance improvement in one area. And also, I see them, reducing the tedious tasks that I do. Like I'm not a big fan of writing regular expressions, for example. You know, yeah, so things like that. If I don't like to do it, some of these tasks, can be taken over from me, so that I will have more time and energy to add value to the software that I make. And uh, if you look at the category of autonomous agents, and if we generalize, we discussed that they can help you delegate some of the things that you do. And another angle that I like to see is they help us remove some of the established limits that we have on ourselves. Let me actually give you an example for this. So think of a software team or even a startup with 5 people. Um, the ambitions that I would have for my 5 people startup is the capacity of 5 people. But with these tools come in, and more than ever, now you can have ambitions much larger, ambitions of, I don't know, like, multiples. So it's actually an exciting times to be in. And with all these things coming in and affecting how we work, how we develop our software, I I think the hype that GenAI has into product engineering is justified.
Yeah,
Right.
I think I have another question, Kalana. You,
Hmm.
I think, touched upon that a bit. So, as software folks out there, it's really hard to keep track of what's coming out. Like every weekend, when you go home and come back, you see new models out there, and SW benchmark is topped by models which are from like competing companies. Sometimes smaller companies are there. Like every weekend, you see a new model coming up, new tool coming up. It's really hard to keep track. So do you find it overwhelming? I'm going to put this same question into our audience as well so that you also can answer. From your side, do you find it overwhelming, Karan, in a way?
Yeah, uh, for sure, because like it's an explosion of tools and the upgrades to the models, and it's difficult to keep track of. And I've talked to like some colleagues who feel like a bit confused where to start because of it, because there's like so much. But I think it's kind of the nature when there's a technological trend like this. So at least what I try to do is I try to try out and grab what I can, because some of these things can be generalized and then applicable applied to a different tool. So yeah, I'll try to ride the wave and try not to get too overwhelmed. I think that's my personal take how I approach it.
Yeah, I empathize you in a way because being CDXO, people might come and ask you, have you tried this tool, that tool, and all. So I can understand what position you are in now.
Yeah,
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 thank you for the answer.
yeah. So yeah, I think we can dive a bit more into these individual areas so that we can talk more about how this actually can be applied in real life. I mean, like we have to go beyond the hype, and we can see in simple steps how we adapt this into our day-to-day development, and from there how we can improve and take it to the next level. So I'd like to start with talking about coding assistants and co-pilots. So if you look at like how it evolves, like we have our classic coding assistants before Gen AI, like things like IntelliSense and code completion. And in the early stage of Gen AI, we had the code completion that we saw in like GitHub Copilot and tools like that, where you start typing and it gives like multiple suggestions of code snippets that you can choose from. And of course, separate AI chat, which kind of act as a reference. You can like have a chat and get some information. Um, and then we see the next stage where the tooling improves so much all of a sudden. Um, so the context, like if you think of the code completion side of it, like the context windows get bigger. So this code completion is more accurate because it can have more context from your source code, and you can even train um, on top of like a larger amount of your code base so that the outputs are much more accurate. And more interestingly, the integration of this AI assistance into your development activities that you do, like if you think of Cursor and GitHub editor, Copilot editor, um, these AI inputs are integrated to what you do in your editor, in your IDE, so that you can apply multiple edits in one go. And you can do it in a conversational manner or a goal-oriented manner, so that you have a bit more structure, and the developer experience is much higher because you don't have to first have the conversation, then go do the changes. Um, and you can give specific context, what exactly the AI should consider when it gives input and the changes, and so on. So like advancement of tooling, right? So that helped us a lot. But where I see the current state and what's most important is we adapt some methodology on top of this advanced tooling that we have, so that because tooling only will not help us get the maximum out of what GenAI can offer for um, assistance in engineering. So prompt development, for example. So we have our own version published on govibe.dev. This is like what we have published is like a very much of a beta version of this methodology, part of what we practice. But of course, you can go and take a look at it and love to hear your feedback as well. So if I explain why we need a methodology, basically like you must have experienced that we have to deal with a limited context when we are working with AI to get help with our development activities. So then we need a way to get maximum out of this limited context window that is available to us. So how we can optimize it. And then we have the problem of maintaining the architectural integrity, because we already have certain architectural decisions made, certain patterns implemented within our code base, and we have to ensure what's generated from AI is the desired outcome. And also, you would have noticed that different AI models are good at different tasks. Um, Simple examples like, whether it's front-end coding, you're doing layouts, or else it's more algorithmic sort of coding tasks that you have in hand. So different models do this differently, but and you should use different models for that same reason. But the problem is the code that's generated from these different models can be different, and you don't need certain these differences in your code base because you need certain quality and standards within it. So then we need a way to govern that. And the fourth point, we also have the problem of AI hallucinations, creating inconsistent code and so on. So with our prompt-driven development methodology, what we're trying to address is these issues. So something that we try out is have guidelines and rules defined at different layers of our uh, you know code structures. So if you think of repository code, we will have certain guidelines that developers can follow as well as AI can follow. So it's really interesting when we try to create it in such a way, it actually improves our develop documentation as well. And you also tend to use your documentation more actively than sometimes we have seen otherwise. And we also see it changed us how we um, design and module our features, code bases, so that these are much more friendlier for the context size um, and context awareness and expected outcome from AI. So for example, we would slice very thin features vertically so that AI context can relate to contracts between these layers. And for example, if you have a repository layer which is like, vertical, of course, these are vertical slice, but then if the AI context has to consider that entire vertical slice to generate something that it can use for a service layer, for example, um, it's simply not efficient. So how we structure our artifacts and the code has changed. So that's one change that we are seeing and adapting and giving us good results. So with this context-aware code generation, we see it's much more higher results, like better results in terms of what AI gives us. And of course, in the same process, we keep improving these guidelines that we can provide so that it improves over the period of time. And this also neutralizes the different skill differences that the team might have within the project, within a team, in terms of using AI as well. So there's a lot of benefits following this way of working. So this is a approach that we take on top of using code assistance for AI-driven development. We actually have a detailed webinar that we have done a bit earlier with regard to this Go Vibe methodology. Of course, we can share the link of the YouTube recording in the chat as we go.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Colin. I think as we are on the same topic, I have another question for you. Again, a bit of controversial question among developer communities. So there are a few AI-assisted developer tools out there. So like we have coding assistants like GitHub Copilot, then Cursor, and we see Windsurf picking up. So out of those, what's your favorite coding assistant at the moment?
Yeah, I think these days, if I had to pick, I'll pick Cursor. because of like the entire developer experience, the extensibility in terms of tooling, different models, and things like that. But it was different. Like if you take few months back, um, yeah, we started with like, for example, GitHub Copilot because of the easy compliance. It comes from Microsoft and GitHub, so it's easy to onboard some of the code bases into it in terms of compliance perspective. So yeah, it changes. But right now, to answer your question, I think my personal favorite right now is Cursor. Again, no affiliations, no sponsors or
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
like that. Just yeah.
Thank you very much for being honest and straight. Otherwise, you could have just gone around the answer without giving straight answer. I'll anyway post this as a question also, Kalana. Sometimes there
Yeah.
might be tools out there which was released a couple of hours ago. We might not know of yet. So I'll post this as question for the audience as well. You can continue.
Yeah. So next, I'd like to dive into the topic of GenAI agents. So in terms for us to understand like what AI can, what these agents can do for me in terms of my development at hand, I think it's good to understand the underlying concept behind it or the capabilities, right? So I see four main capabilities that makes agents what they are. So agents are able to plan what they want to achieve. So if you want to achieve a certain goal, it can plan its activities, multiple steps that it should carry out. It's able to evaluate the outcomes from these different steps, reason about them, and change them if it has to achieve these outcomes. And then we have memory, ability to remember rules, guidelines. It could be long-term memory, short-term memory, like even remembering which step I'm performing right now, all the way to information how something should be carried out. So it could be your code review guidelines from the project. It could be some of your architectural guidelines, things like that. So then agents are able to work with tooling, basically to give it capabilities to carry out tasks. So we see like these tooling integrations getting standardized with MCP, um, and like similar, yeah, I think MCP is like the most widely adapted and popular integration protocol or the standard, I would say. Um, so yeah, the explosion of tools, and this allows agents to do things on behalf of you and extend the capabilities what an agent can do. And of course, actioning things. So using all these elements, agent is able to carry out a certain goal or perform a task. So now we know what, in theory, agents can do. I can take you through a few of the use cases that we adapt at 99X for using agents in software development. So, like earlier, when I broadly categorized tools, I categorized code assistants and agents separately, but you can see obviously with like tools like Cursor, these kind of merge together, like you have the agentic capabilities in these tools. So anyway, with a tool with agentic behavior, we can get it to generate code for a certain goal, like create a module which these requirements and these constraints likewise. And agents can look at our code and review it for us, ensure that we are on track. We'll take a look at an example for that. And agents can help with code refactoring and also porting or translation of a code. It could be a version upgrade, or it could be an entire porting from one language or a tech stack to another. And also my favorite, personal favorite in terms of architectural fitness functions, we can use agents to help with that. So I'll take probably 2 minutes to dig a bit deep into that topic. So if you are already not using architectural fitness function is basically objective function that measure how close we are to a desired standard that we have. For example, like, in your system, in your application, you will have certain goals in terms of code quality, compliance, security. So your code has to follow certain organizational or team practices in terms of compliance. Your logs shouldn't have any sensitive details or sensitive information. And in terms of resiliency, for example, yeah, or between the integrations, the errors should be handled properly and so on. So let's take examples of enforcing this through agents. Um, if you want to enforce fitness of your observability, you would have certain standards that how the logging should be, and you have proper log correlation and traceability. So these rules can be input to an agent who will ensure every pull request created by every developer in your project is following these standards. So I also talked about resilience, like things like exception handling the edge cases, things like that. You can again enforce these rules much more easily through agents. And because some of these rules change as well, so the definition of these rules, you can use natural language plus code examples, things like that, so that experience of keep them up to date and actually enforcing them is much more easy as well. So I'll take a look at a quick implementation of where you can simply start with an agent in your code review process. So this it's a simplified sequence diagram. It doesn't follow all the steps and the notation, but if you think of a developer opening a pull request in a code base, you can invoke a webhook like a Lambda function or a Azure functions through a webhook, who will fetch the changed source code files and identify the diff, and it can fetch what kind of fitness rules that this code should comply with. And then with all those artifacts, it can consult an AI model and get recommendations. Is this code, matches these rules and guidelines? What needs to be changed? And these guidelines can be further reasoned, validated, and then, for example, if there are some recommendations that we should change in that PR, we can add some PR comments into the PR, like any of my peer developers would do, or else it can even open a new pull request on top of my branch with these suggestions so that I can review and merge them back in. So this is a very simple use case that you can adapt, but then you will also see what you can do within this function is very limited. So that's where we usually do this in a Docker container where we can add more tools, more capabilities into it. So Docker container execution can be, like some sort of container execution can be managed by this function. So it could be a layer in between. And if you have more complex execution for these agents, you can use agentic frameworks that's out there. So I will show you a very quick example how we do this flow in this like a sample project that I want to show you, where a developer opens a pull request and it will trigger the agentic flow that I explained to you. So for this example, we are using the agent framework that Nitronix has internally called Seance AI. So in this flow, basically what you see running here, it has multiple steps defined. relating to the sequence diagram that I showed, which fetches the source code and get the observability specification in this case, the rules that the code should follow, and yeah, it evaluates observability by talking to an AI model and getting the outcome, and it applies this outcome into the code and opens a new pull request, so that developer can go and review before incorporating into back of the code. So having that developer in the loop is important at the moment. So, but it makes it much more faster and reduces the human errors in the peer review process or the pull request review process. So that's a quick example of how agents can be incorporated. So yeah, like my advice to teams is just start small and then see how you can expand and improve the outcome of that process.
Yeah. Kalana, we have a question in the Q&A section as well. So that person is asking, as a company, are we allowing coding agents as extension on our code? So I think we can touch a bit on the IP part as well as we are answering this question.
Yes. So it depends on project to project, and of course, it involves the consent from the IP owner, like who owns the intellectual property as well as a service organization. But yes, like the agentic tools are in place, but we always have the developer in the loop because these tools are not perfect yet. And in terms of understand the requirements, the expectations from the architecture and things like that, developer is the the leader or the person who guides this process. So we have the developer in the loop, but we use agents in that process. Johan, was there a question about IP as well, like intellectual property, like
No,
violation?
I was thinking like this question may be on that as well, because
Right.
it's not very clear the direction. But I think what you answered was the what is expected at least. So if you are not agreeing, you can just comment back on the discussion. We can take it in the end of the presentation. And Kalana, while I was looking into what you were presenting, so one question came into my mind is that if we have agents doing the work, so in comparison to a developer, we have several ways to evaluate a developer. We have code review process and even appraisals like processes which are code related, non-code related, developer oriented, not developer oriented, process oriented. But what could be the ways to evaluate an agent, whether it's giving the correct result set, and how do we ensure that it works fine?
Yeah, I think it gives us entry to what I want to discuss next in terms of ensuring how AI works in the development flow. I think I'll first share some points with you why it is important than ever. Because one thing, the first point, right? So this is a new area and a lot of new tools coming in, a lot of experimentation happening. So in such environment, in the innovation phase, the chance of failure is high. So that whatever you try out, chance of failure is high. So it's really important that you know when it happens and you can pivot. And also, since it's new things that we're trying out, the measurements, the ways of measuring are not well defined, something that you need to explore and find out. So because of it, again, it makes it much more important that we start measuring and not keep the measurements for later. And another reason that I see why this check and balances is important is sometimes this investment can be significant, right? You are using an AI model, for example, and your agentic flow uses lot of calls to the AI, which has large context windows. So you might be using a lot of money on it. And some of the tooling that the licenses that you get can be high cost. So whether you should keep using the same tool or switch to different tools, so this investment can be significant compared to some of the other tooling that we use. So that's another reason why we should check whether it really works. And another point is the opportunity cost, right? If I'm using a tool which is not working for me right now, someone else might be using a tool that works for them. So we are in a very competitive environment in product development. So we can't be using a tool that's not working. So that pressure is also there. So yes, I think that's good enough reasons that we should ensure it works. So like how we tackle it or the different ways that we can tackle based on the application is simple things like start measuring the usage, for example. Like that's a starting point. Like if you are like if you think the primary case of like code completion suggestions, how many suggestions are accepted, how many suggestions are rejected. These statistics can help you understand like how developers use these tools, whether it works for them, whether it doesn't. And if you incorporate reviews into like agents into pull request, or you can see how many comments that you get are valid and rejected, how many pull requests that are generated by AI is actually merged. So if you have like especially if you have some tooling for engineering performance analysis or engineering intelligence, you can use those existing tools to see how these pull requests behave, so that you will be able to get a understanding there. And you can also, if you have existing fitness function tests, like you have your code quality check-in tool, like integrated centralized tool, which checks your code base, you can see the results of that after you incorporate some of these tools. Again, having that trigger that you should go and check that measurement, it's very important. And of course, the basics like cost analysis versus what kind of output that you get, things like that. So Johan, for me, the highlight is when you experiment these things, it's really easy not to measure because you are trying out new things. But it's really important that you measure these outcomes just to see if you're on the correct track. So that's how I see the measurement should be.
Yep. And yep, thank you for that answer, Kalana. So I think we have around 15 minutes left from the original planned time. We can take any more questions if we have from the audience as well. And also, Kalana, on the same question we had earlier, there's a follow-up question. And I see Hasit is already answering some, but for the video purpose, we can try to get an answer from you as well. So the same post or a different one is asking whether there are any security issues or compliance issues when you use coding agents in your code.
Right. So lot of these popular tools, like if you take GitHub Copilot, Cursor, they handle this problem in two ways. One, they do active effort to ensure the suggested code or the generated code does not violate known examples, like does not violate anyone's existing IP. So that's a technical side of the solution. And on top of it, they also provide IP indemnity. in terms of legal and compliance aspect. So if you're using a paid licenses, if you're using a paid license, these companies, they legally protect you from some of these issues that can arise from, accidental IP violations, things like that. So I think those two are the approaches that I see that are actively provided by the tool providers in order to prevent the IP violation aspect.
Yes.
Hope that answers the question.
I hope, if not, they can reply on the same thread. And we have another question, Kalana. So he or she is asking, there are so many LLMs and apps which are helpful for AI generated coding. So is there a guideline for a developer to select which LLM or tool that we should use depending on the environment or the programming language?
I actually haven't come across a guideline as such. We do have experience sharing through experience of last year, 1.5 years or so. So, but like I said, if you look at the model and the type of activity, the outcome changes with every version upgrade of the model. So right now for coding, for me personally, with the tech stacks that I'm using, I see Anthropic performs well. If you ask me the same question probably 6 months back, it would be OpenAI models. So that's where I see, and I think to the same equation, there's another factor comes in, like the cost of model usage. So you see things like models like DeepSeek are much more cheaper than, for example, Anthropic models for the same amount of work that you want to carry out. And again, then you would also have another concerns into this model selection, things like compliance, like where this model is hosted, whether the company that hosts can be trusted, things like that. So even like if you think of a model like DeepSeek, you or your organization might have restrictions in terms of geographics and things like that. But still, you can see DeepSeek model hosted on Azure in European region, for example, is not an issue for an organization which restricts usage of models in that has to be in EU region. So there are a lot of concerns in terms of selecting the model which works and which model to use. There's no one golden answer for this. I think we'll have to try out and figure out for my use case what's the model that works out.
Yeah. And there's another question, Kalana. So I'll read out the question. So it's a bit connected to our previous slide on ensuring AI works as it should. So what architectural considerations are important when integrating Gen AI into existing platforms like healthcare industry, especially in light of real world failures like Air Canada chatbot incident? So, but what if incorrect AI generated information led to customer harm? So like he's giving out an example.
Yeah, I think this example probably comes from a feature or like a user-oriented example, but the same thing can happen, like he has rightly mentioned, in architectural concerns as well. So I think that's the primary purpose of methodology like Go Vibe Dev, where we try to guide AI to follow the set practices. How we can do that? We can give it more context using the set rules and guidelines that rest of the developers follow, because it's like a junior developer who joins the team, right? So if that person does not have the understanding of how the architecture should be, then there's a chance that he or she might make a mistake. So then we prevent that from sharing some architectural guidelines some awareness, some guidance training. So the same principles apply to these tools as well. So how you can do it efficiently? You can use examples, you can use docs in the code, like in Go Vibe Dev that we discussed, and also have multiple checkpoints. It could be AI-based checkpoints, or it could be even a manual checkpoint to ensure that what we generate is there. So this risk is something that we carry. But if you look at the gains versus the risk that we see in a lot of use cases, the gains are higher. And then you need to have mechanisms to mitigate the risks.
Yep, I don't see any more questions in the chat, so you can keep posting if you have any questions. Otherwise, I can give another question to Kalan. For I think we can discuss on that a bit. So, do we have any more questions in the chat? No, I think. So, Kalana, there's a bit of hype and a bit of discussion around having own models trained locally for like companies to use within the company boundaries and to host, so that a lot of IP violation and security compliance issues we talked about could be mitigated. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's a direct approach to handle such concerns. Right now, in our experiments, what we so far what we realized is the cost of hosting your own models is higher than using readily available services. Because I think it's also about the usage, like, if you want to run your own model on your own hardware for one team, it might not be used at the optimal level all the time. Like, you might have the server running for the entire duration, but no one might be using. So these platform as services, or like, SaaS products, are able to tackle the resource usage much better, because they'll be having a large number of users which will use the same resources. So in terms of finances, the cost, I see still using the readily available services is much cheaper. But it's likely that this threshold might cross at that some point as well, like, hosting your own LLM as capable as service that you can get might become cheaper. Either hosting it like, locally, or like locally as in like in on-premise hardware, or even on a cloud infrastructure. But right now, from what I see, it's a bit expensive unless you have a where like a dire concern to do that in terms of compliance, security, things like that.
Yep. And we have another question, Kalana. So, and I will add another part to that from 99x perspective. So the question is asking, do you expect employees to adapt AI agents for coding? And my addition to that question is, how is your experience as chief DX for 99x from the developer perspective?
Yeah, I think the adaption, what I see is similar to any new technology or any new trend. Like, we have the early adapters who are much excited. They drive this adaption. They're excited to see what tools comes next and try it out. And there are some who is confused because of the overwhelming nature of the trend that we discussed earlier. Like, there's a lot of tools to choose from. So setting guidelines is really important. Like Stack Overflow, I remembers this fact. Stack Overflow did a developer survey from a group of like an open survey from engineers, and I think around 60 or around closer to 70% said they don't know their AI policy of the organization. They don't know which tools they can use, which tools they can't use. So I think removing such obstacles and providing some guidelines, trainings, awareness, that helps teams to adapt. And it's also that, when it works, when engineers see something works, then they are much more interested. And when it's not working for them due to mismatch of tool, mismatch of the tech stack they're in, or else the phase of the development phase of the project. So there can be reasons why it works for someone and why it doesn't work for someone. So sometimes we see teams get discouraged because of that. So these are the concerns that we need to manage in terms of adapting and getting engineers excited about this.
Yeah. And Kalana, we have another question in the chat. Refactoring is an important requirement for the developer, which should be done before any modification to be done. How these coding tools could help developers also to understand the code base developed by previous developers. So he's asking, happy to know your suggestions and any advices on refactoring part and code done by previous developers when you want to modify something using agents.
Yeah. So I think I see this question as two part. Definitely like a chat feature of this coding assistant tool is a great way to help us understand existing code base. And especially now the context window is getting bigger. You can like give it the context of multiple files or one fold of your project structure and ask, okay, based on this information and this code file that have open, explain me what's going on. So that's understanding part of it. So with that understanding, you can of course do your own manual refactoring or else get AI to give you suggestions for refactoring. So this refactoring again can be various reasons. Are you refactoring for readability? Are you refactoring for maintainability? So based on that, what you're trying to achieve might differ. Another angle that I see and that we try for code refactoring is having a central agent, because we have code bases that have lived for longer, which might need refactoring. So we can have a code refactoring agent who looks at this code and opens one pull request each week for the team, so that team has time and team can manage looking at that PR and see if the refactoring is correct and things like that. So a central approach to code refactoring is one way to go about. And of course, you can use it to refactor different concerns that you have at the developer level.
Yeah. As we only have a couple of minutes left, Kalana, we have two questions, but I think we can give a combined answer. So
Right.
the first part of the question is, how do you think developers starting out in the industry should keep up with the age of agentic AI? And the second part is that any predictions about tech jobs in the coming AI agents era?
Yeah, predictions are risky things to do. So one thing that I see is one important skills for any engineer starting or even experienced. With this tooling, our review skills are much more challenged. So code review skills, design review skills, architectural pattern review skills. So because you will be reviewing the artifacts generated by AI, as well as you are giving directions. This is what I want to achieve. So architectural and review skills are much more important in the era of AI-assisted engineering. For any new entrant to the industry, it's really important that you know the concepts and you know what is generated by AI and not the other way around. Like, you don't follow what AI generates without knowing how it works. So, but you can use AI as a learning tool. But I think it's really, really important that you know your concepts and you know your technology so that you can ensure that you can guide AI. I think that's how I see that. Yeah.
Yep. I think we can take the last question here, Kalana. So the question is like reducing the code complexity is a time-consuming task for a developer. Tools like SonarQube was helping to some extent. How these AI coding tools could help and could support during the coding as well as after completing a particular round or a sprint.
Yeah, I really like this question, and it's really good that you have something like SonarQube, which ensures like it's a fitness call, right? You code complexity has to be managed, so you have that check somewhere in your development workflow. And with this AI tools, you can incorporate adhering to that much earlier in your development cycle. So you are moving left this concern. So during development time, or as then when you open the pull request, this concern will be tested and you will get feedback. So then the cost of you doing the right thing is much less, because if there's a change that you need to do to reduce, for example, code complexity, you can do it during dev time or else at the pull request time, rather than finding it out much later in your development flow. So yes, you can get help from especially the chat mode to check the code complexity and get suggestions how you can reduce. And I think other side of this is when you're providing a prompt, it's also you need to guide AI so that it will not generate code that is so optimized and complex so that a human developer find it difficult to understand. So that's also an extreme that we see happening with AI generated code. So you can, by prompt, you can manage that as well, so that it's not overly optimized when it doesn't need to be. I mean, there can be instances where it needs to be optimized for performance, etc. We make that decision when you write our own code as well. So the same applies to AI as well. Hope that answers.
Yep, I think we have just completed the given time for this webinar. And I would like to thank Karan for giving us this content, which was really helpful. For me personally, I'm sure that everyone who joined here would have felt the same. And also, Kalana, I would like to thank the audience here for being very engaging audience, because that made my life a bit easier in this in performing this job. And also, I would like to state to everyone that all these recordings will be updated on our website. You can reach there and look into this and the previous recordings as well. Yep. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming here. I think we can wind the webinar up.
Thanks, Ara. Thanks, Johan.